After 10 years of marriage, I thought I had seen it all, the ups, the downs, and the quiet in-betweens. Madison, my wife, was my partner in everything. We had built a life together brick by brick, or so I thought. But sometimes, the cracks in the foundation appear when you least expect them. It all started innocently enough. One Tuesday evening, Madison suggested I meet her for lunch downtown. She rarely suggested things like that. She preferred our cozy dinners at home, but I figured it was her way of keeping things fresh. I arrived a bit early, eager for what I thought was a spontaneous spark in our routine. But then, I saw him. A tall, sharply dressed man walked up to her table, his face lighting up when he saw her. Madison's smile in return wasn't the kind she gave to coworkers or old friends. No, this was different, warmer, softer, intimate. They leaned in close, their conversation too animated, too easy. I felt my stomach churn. Who was he? Was this a work thing? A friendly lunch? My mind fought for rational answers even as my gut told me something was terribly wrong. I watched from a distance, trying not to let my emotions take over. They laughed, shared inside jokes, and at one point, he reached out to touch her hand. Madison didn't pull away. My heart sank, but I stayed rooted in place, unable to leave yet unwilling to confront them. Then came the moment that changed everything. The man glanced at his watch, and Madison nodded, her face turning serious. They stood, hugged briefly but closely, and walked out together. My first instinct was to follow, but instead, I sat frozen, trying to process what I had just seen. What would come next? Confrontation? Investigation? I didn't know, but the world as I knew it had already begun to shift. The drive home after that lunch was a blur, my mind racing in circles. Who was that man? Why was Madison with him? Every time I thought I had a grasp on it. Maybe he was a coworker, maybe it was just a friendly lunch. My gut pushed back, reminding me of how close they'd been. Her smile, the touch of his hand. Those weren't things you did with just anyone. When I got home, Madison was already there, chopping vegetables in the kitchen like nothing had happened. She looked up and smiled when I walked in, but for the first time, I noticed it wasn't reaching her eyes. Or was I just looking for something that wasn't there? "Hey," she said casually, "how was work?" "Same as always," I replied, forcing a smile. I studied her closely, trying to pick up on anything, any sign, any hint that something was off. We ate dinner in near silence, the usual rhythm of our conversations replaced by a quiet tension. Madison seemed distracted, her eyes occasionally flicking to her phone. It sat on the table beside her, face down, which was unusual. She was the type to have it charging in the other room during meals, claiming she hated interruptions. That night, as she slept beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about the man from the cafe. The way he looked at her, the way she seemed to lean into his every word. Was I overreacting? Was this just a bad case of insecurity? Or was there something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face? By morning, I had made a decision. I needed answers. But I couldn't just come out and ask her. If there was nothing going on, I'd come off as paranoid, insecure, maybe even controlling. No, I needed to figure this out on my own, quietly. The next day, I took a small but deliberate step. While Madison was in the shower, I picked up her phone. My hands shook slightly as I keyed in her passcode, an old anniversary date I had memorized years ago. The screen unlocked, and I braced myself for what I might find. Most of her messages were mundane. Group chats with her friends, reminders from the kids' schools, a few emails. Nothing unusual. But then, there was a name I didn't recognize, Liam. My chest tightened. The messages weren't overtly romantic, but they had an undertone that didn't sit right. Simple things like, "See you soon," and "Today was great. Thanks for making me laugh." I scrolled further, trying to piece together their relationship, But Madison had been careful. There were no long conversations, no revealing texts. Either she was deleting them, or they were communicating in a way I couldn't track. My frustration grew, but I put the phone back before she got out of the shower. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time Madison left the house, whether for work, errands, or her yoga class, I felt the same gnawing doubt. I started paying closer attention to her routine, noticing little things I hadn't before. How she was suddenly more particular about her appearance, how her phone was always with her now, even in the bathroom. Things that felt small on their own but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. Then, one evening, she made a mistake. She went to bed early, leaving her phone on the counter while it charged. I wasn't planning to check it again. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but then it buzzed. The screen lit up, and a preview of a message appeared. Liam, tomorrow, same time? Can't wait to see you. My breath caught. There was no mistaking it now. Madison was meeting this Liam again. I sat there, staring at the phone, the anger and hurt swelling inside me like a tidal wave. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know exactly what was going on. The next day, I followed her. It was easy enough. Madison left the house in her usual car, dressed casually but with a hint of extra effort, subtle makeup, a touch of perfume. I stayed a few cars behind, careful not to get too close. She drove across town, eventually pulling into a parking lot near a small park. And there he was, Liam. I parked a distance away and watched as she walked toward him. He greeted her with a wide smile, pulling her into a hug that lasted a beat too long. They began walking down one of the park's winding trails, talking animatedly. At one point, he leaned in close, and she laughed, the sound carrying across the crisp air. My stomach turned. I followed them at a distance, careful to stay out of sight. They stopped by a bench, sitting close, their heads bent together as they talked. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure they could hear it. I felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and something else I couldn't quite name. A deep, raw sadness. They stayed there for nearly an hour before parting ways. No kiss, no overt display of affection, but the connection between them was undeniable. As Madison got back into her car and drove away, I stayed in the park, staring at the empty bench where they'd sat. This was no misunderstanding. This was no harmless friendship. Something was happening between them, and I needed to figure out what to do next. When Madison walked through the door that evening, I couldn't look at her the same way. Every smile she gave me, every casual remark, it all felt fake. Like she was playing a part in a show she thought I was too blind to see through. My heart was pounding, but I kept my cool, not ready to tip my hand yet. Hey, she said, setting her bag down on the counter. How was your day? Not bad, I replied, forcing a neutral tone. Yours? She hesitated, just for a split second, but it was enough to notice. Busy, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. You know, the usual. The way she said it, the way she avoided my eyes. It was like she was daring me to press her for details. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded and went about my evening as if nothing was wrong. Inside, though, the anger and confusion were bubbling, threatening to spill over. Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of everything Madison did. The little changes I'd been ignoring now felt like flashing neon signs. She was texting more than usual, her phone always angled away from me. She'd leave the room to take calls, claiming it was just work. And then there was her schedule, subtle shifts that seemed designed to keep her out of the house longer than normal. I knew I couldn't keep playing dumb forever. The evidence was piling up, and I needed to confront her. But how? I didn't want to give her an opportunity to deny it or twist the story. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't wriggle out of. That's when I decided to set a trap. One evening, while Madison was in the shower, I borrowed her phone again. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, taking screenshots of every text with Liam and emailing them to myself. There wasn't much, just brief exchanges that hinted at meetups, but it was enough to confirm what I already knew. I saved the screenshots in a folder on my laptop, hidden away but ready when I needed them. I also decided to hire a private investigator. It felt extreme, even invasive, but I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach any longer. If Madison was hiding something, I needed to know the full extent of it. The PI, a no-nonsense woman named Claire, assured me she'd get to the bottom of things. "This isn't my first rodeo," she said during our initial meeting. "If there's something going on, I'll find it." The waiting was the hardest part. While Claire worked, I had to go on pretending everything was normal at home. Madison's behavior continued to feed my suspicions. Her late nights, her sudden interest in her appearance, and the way she seemed almost too cheerful around me, like she was overcompensating for something. A week later, Claire called me. "We need to meet," she said. "I have some updates." My heart sank. The way she said it left no doubt in my mind. She had found something. We agreed to meet at a small diner on the edge of town. I arrived early, my palms sweaty as I clutched my coffee cup. When Claire walked in, she carried a manila folder, her expression serious. "Here's what I've got," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "It's not good." I opened it, my stomach twisting as I flipped through the contents. Photos of Madison and Liam together, at the park, at a cafe, and, most damning of all, entering a hotel. The timestamps were clear, the evidence undeniable. There was no longer any room for doubt. "They've met at the hotel twice in the past week," Claire said, her tone professional but sympathetic. "And based on their body language, it's not just a casual friendship." I stared at the photos, my chest tight with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice strained. "I'll let you know if I need anything else." Claire nodded, leaving me alone with the evidence of my wife's betrayal. The drive home was quiet, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a weight I couldn't escape. By the time I walked through the door, Madison was already setting the table for dinner, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Hey," she said, her voice warm. "You're home a little late." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Got caught up at work." As we sat down to eat, I couldn't stop glancing at her, wondering how she could sit there so calmly, so innocently, when I knew the truth. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? What had I done to deserve this? Was she even capable of feeling guilt? After dinner, I retreated to the study, claiming I had work to catch up on. In reality, I needed time to think, to plan my next move. The evidence was there, but confronting her still felt daunting. How would she react? Would she deny it, even with the proof in front of her? Or worse, would she double down, accusing me of invading her privacy? The questions kept me up that night, my thoughts spiraling in every direction. Madison slept soundly beside me, her breathing steady and calm. I couldn't help but wonder if Liam was on her mind, even as she lay next to me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The truth was out, and it was time for Madison to face it. The morning of the confrontation, I felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. I'd spent the night replaying everything in my head, the photos, the texts, the quiet moments of doubt that had been gnawing at me for weeks. But now there was no escaping it. The truth was out, and Madison had to face it. She was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she made coffee. The casual ease with which she went about her morning made my stomach churn. How could she act so normal, knowing what she was doing behind my back? "Madison," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up, startled. "Yeah, can we talk?" Her hands paused, mid-stir, and she turned to face me. "Of course. What's going on?" "Sit down," I said, motioning to the dining table. She hesitated for a moment, searching my face for clues, before nodding and taking a seat. I followed, the folder in my hand feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone light, but with an edge of caution. I set the folder on the table and slid it toward her. "Open it." Her eyes flicked between me and the folder, confusion clouding her expression. Slowly, she reached for it, her hands trembling slightly as she flipped it open. The first photo stared back at her and Liam walking into the hotel together. Her face paled. "Michael, she began, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said, my voice low and steady. "Don't insult me by pretending this isn't what it looks like." Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at the photos, her face crumpling as tears welled in her eyes. "I can explain," she whispered. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Go ahead. Explain how you've been meeting another man, lying to me, and sneaking around behind my back. I'm all ears." Her tears spilled over as she buried her face in her hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she choked out. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly. "That's what you've got? It wasn't supposed to happen? Do you think that makes this better?" She looked up, her eyes red and desperate. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I swear, it's over. I ended it." I slammed my hand on the table, making her flinch. "When? Before or after your last hotel rendezvous?" Her silence told me everything I needed to know. "Why, Madison?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why him? Why now? What did I do to deserve this?" Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, her words barely audible. "It wasn't about you. It was never about you." I felt lost, like I didn't know who I was anymore. And Liam, he made me feel seen. Seen? I repeated, incredulous. "What am I, a ghost? We've been married for 10 years, Madison. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me." She reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. The gesture seemed to break her even more. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I thought I could stop. I thought it would just fade away." "But it didn't," I said coldly. "You kept choosing him, Madison, over and over again." The room fell silent except for her quiet sobs. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I'd loved for a decade with the person sitting across from me now. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said finally, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "You've destroyed everything I thought we had." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything to fix this. Please, Michael, just tell me what to do." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first, but when it buzzed again, Madison glanced at it nervously. "You should check that," she said quietly. I stood and grabbed the phone, glancing at the screen. My stomach dropped. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. It's about Liam." I froze, my mind racing. Madison saw the look on my face and asked, "What is it?" Ignoring her, I opened the message. There was more. "This is going to sound crazy, but I've been seeing Liam too. I think we both deserve to know the truth." The world tilted beneath me. Madison wasn't the only one Liam had been making feel seen. And now, someone else, his other lover, apparently, was reaching out to me. "What is it?" Madison pressed, her voice tinged with panic. I turned to face her, holding up my phone. "It seems Liam's been busy," I said, my voice cold. "Very busy." Her eyes widened, confusion and fear mingling in her expression. What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, sitting back down, "you're not the only one he's been stringing along." The shock on her face would have been satisfying if I weren't so furious. She looked as though the ground had been ripped out from under her, the betrayal cutting her as deeply as she had cut me. "What now, Madison?" I asked, my voice bitter. "Still think he made you feel seen?" Her silence was deafening. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The betrayal from Madison was painful enough, but learning that Liam had been playing her, too, gave me a strange sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing the lies that had ruined everything I thought I knew. And the message from Liam's other lover gave me the opportunity one needed. I responded to her text, "I think we should meet. Tell me everything." She replied quickly, suggesting a coffee shop downtown. Her name was Emma, and as I walked into the cafe later that afternoon, I found her sitting near the window, fidgeting with her cup. She looked up when I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "You must be Michael," she said, offering a weak smile. I nodded, taking the seat across from her. "And you're Emma?" We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. "I'm sorry to reach out like this. I didn't know what else to do." "It's fine," I said, though nothing about the situation felt fine. "Tell me what's going on." She sighed, stirring her coffee. "I've been seeing Liam for a little over a year now. I had no idea he was involved with anyone else until recently. But then I saw a text pop up on his phone, your wife's name." She glanced at me, her expression pained. I didn't know how to process it. I thought maybe it was work-related, but, well, you know. My jaw tightened. "Yeah, I know." Emma hesitated, then leaned in. "He's been telling me he wants to leave his complicated life behind, that he's ready for something serious, with me. But now, I don't know what to believe anymore." "I thought you deserved to know." I nodded, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Liam wasn't just a smooth-talking charmer. He was a manipulator, stringing along multiple women to feed his ego. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked, my voice steady. Emma's eyes hardened. "Confront him. Together." The idea gave me pause. Confronting Liam with Madison in the mix was already going to be messy. Adding Emma to the equation could turn it explosive. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how fitting it would be. Liam had thrived on secrecy, on keeping everyone in the dark. Bringing the truth to light in front of everyone? That felt right. "All right," I said finally. "Let's do it." We decided on a neutral location, the same park where I had first seen Madison and Liam together. Emma reached out to him, setting up the meeting under the pretense of needing to talk about their future. I let Madison know I needed to meet her there, too, without telling her why. She agreed, likely still reeling from the fallout of our confrontation. The stage was set. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, my heart pounding as I waited on a bench near the park's edge. Madison showed up first, her face wary. "What's going on?" she asked. "You'll see," I said simply, gesturing for her to sit. She did, glancing around nervously. A few minutes later, Emma arrived, and Madison's eyes widened. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "This is Emma," I said, keeping my tone even. "She's been seeing Liam, too." Madison's face went pale, her lips parting in shock. Before she could respond, Liam appeared, walking toward us with his usual confident stride. But when he saw all three of us together, he froze. His expression shifted from confusion to panic in an instant. "Michael." "Madison," he said, his voice cautious. Then his eyes landed on Emma. What's going on?" Emma stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "What's going on, Liam, is that your lies have finally caught up to you." Liam opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "Save it. We all know the truth now. Madison, Emma, me. You've been playing all of us." His face twisted, and for the first time, I saw cracks in his polished exterior. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. "I was just confused." Confused? Madison snapped, finding her voice. You were seeing both of us, lying to both of us, and you call that confused? Emma crossed her arms, glaring at him. You told me I was the only one, that you wanted a life with me. And you told me I was special, Madison said, her voice breaking. Liam looked between them, his usual charm failing him. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just... Stop, I said, stepping forward. My voice was calm, but firm. You don't get to play the victim here. You've destroyed lives, manipulated people who trusted you, and for what? Your own ego? Liam's shoulders slumped, his bravado crumbling. For the first time, he seemed at a loss for words. Madison turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. Michael, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I nodded, my expression unreadable. I know, but that doesn't change what you did. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind. Finally, Emma spoke. I'm done, Liam. Don't contact me again. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Liam standing there, looking like a man who had lost everything. Madison hesitated, glancing at me, but I shook my head. Go, I said softly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face as she walked away without another word. I stood there, watching as Liam tried to gather himself. Finally, he looked at me, his face filled with regret. I'm sorry, he said weakly. Don't apologize to me, I said coldly. Apologize to yourself. You're the one who has to live with this. And with that, I walked away, leaving Liam alone in the park. A man stripped of his lies, with no one left to believe them. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Madison and I decided to separate, though the conversations were civil. There was too much damage to repair, and we both knew it. Emma reached out once more to thank me, but I declined to stay in contact. I needed a clean break from everything. As for Liam, I didn't hear from him again. And honestly, that was fine by me. In the end, the betrayal wasn't just about Madison's actions or Liam's lies. It was about rediscovering who I was in the face of it all. And as painful as the journey had been, it gave me something I hadn't realized I'd lost. A sense of clarity, a chance to rebuild, a chance to start over. And that's exactly what I did.